My full name is Charlene Elsie Cornelius. Charlene is spelled Charlene. Elsie is Elsie. Cornelius is Cornelius. We lived in Oneida, but I was born in the hospital in Green Bay.
Can you give me your mother and father's names?
My mother's maiden name was Frances Mabel Sickles. My father's name was Charles Solomon Cornelius.
And can you give me do you know their birth dates?
Yeah, Frances was born August 15th, 1901. My dad was born December 8th, 1898.
Do you remember how old they were when they passed away?
My dad was about 42, 43, I think. 42.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was 56.
She was that young? I thought she was older. Oh, okay. And where did you live when you were growing up?
When I was born?
When you were growing up?
Oh, well, I can retract where I lived when I was born.
Oh, that's good. You can do that.
We lived over by the Silvery Summit School. There was a small house, and I was the eighth living child born, and we were all in that two-room house with a loft upstairs, and then later on we moved to a house across from what wasn't known as Garrisow's Bar, and then my brother Wayne was born there, and then we later on got a farm up on it's called Van Boxel Road now by that water tower, where Rita Webster lived. That was our homestead there, and we lived there when my sister Julie was born, and my brother, my youngest one, Ronald, was born in the living room there.
Oh.
And after my dad died, and our houses kept getting smaller and smaller, so we moved all the time where it was closer to school. So we moved up on 55, then we moved back on H, and then we moved over to it was my Aunt Cora's house over by my grandma's house on E, my grandma Elsie Adams. And then we moved up again back to that was my Aunt Isabel's house, back across from Garrisow's. And then I graduated Silvery Summit School, and my mother remarried, and we moved to Black Creek.
And who did your mother marry?
Nelson Paulus.
Did they have any children?
No, we were all born, there was 15 pregnancies, and 11 of us got to adulthood, but we're all by the same mother and father.
Can you give me the names of your sisters and brothers?
My oldest brother, who was born first, was Leo, and he died when he was 3 days old. And then Harriet, she married a Jurgensen, Norbert Jurgensen, and she's passed on. And my brother Harold, he was married twice. He had a bride up in England, and he also married Gloria Schuyler, his second marriage. He's passed on. There's my brother Harrison. He married an Italian woman and lived in Kansas City. He's passed on. My brother Merlin, he married, his wife's name was Janice. She was German, brought up in Appleton. And he's passed on. She's still living. And my sister Evangeline, she was married to first generation Dutchman, and she's passed on. They had children, and they lived in Appleton. And my sister Roberta, she married Reuben Anderson. I think he was Swedish or Danish, I'm not sure, but anyway, he passed on recently. My sister Irene, she married Leroy Lenhart from Kokona. He was a German fellow, and he's passed. Well, they're both passed on. Then there's next in line is myself. I was married. My ex-husband was Martin Cooper, and I never remarried. The next one was Wayne. He married Cleo Schuyler, and then the next one is Julie Barton. She married Robert Barton, and then my youngest brother Ronald, and he married Rosie Rosalia, and they live in New Mexico.
Oh, a large
And
family.
everybody has children
Everybody has children.
and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
How many children do you have?
I only had two. I had two daughters, but now I have 6 grandchildren, and I got 7 great-grandchildren.
Can you give me your daughter's name?
My oldest daughter is Terry Lee Francis Cooper Black Owl. She married a Cheyenne from Oklahoma. My youngest daughter is Marsha Lou Cooper Baker. She married a Chippewa from the Coudray. They each have 3 children.
Oh, okay. And then can you tell me a little bit about, if you know anything about your grandparents?
Yes, my mother's parents was Elsie Cornelius, and she married an Albert Sickles, and then she also, her second marriage was Chauncey Adams, and her mother was Elizabeth Jordan, and her father was Elijah Cornelius, and my dad's mother was Marion Charles, and his father was Solomon Cornelius. That's as far back.
Did you ever get to meet them?
I knew my grandmothers. My grandfathers had passed away young. They were quite, I guess, middle age. But my grandmothers, I did know both of them.
Did you spend time with your grandmothers?
My mother's mother most of the time, but my father's mother didn't speak English.
Oh.
And she spoke Oneida all the time, but she did know a few words. But my maternal grandmother, she was fluent both in English and Oneida.
Mm-hmm. Do you speak Oneida?
No, that's one thing I always wanted to speak Oneida. One time in Chicago, we had Oneida Club, and we started Oneida Languages in 1964. Around that time, and I came up, I was going to school in Lake Forest, Illinois, and I relocated back to go to take the language courses at UWGB back in 1972.
Did your parents ever talk about if they went to school and how far they went?
Mm-hmm. My mother went to the Indian school up at Kushina, and my father went to Toma, and my mother also went to Hampton Institute, and I'm not sure, but I know my father went out east, and my mother said that she did go to Carlisle the last year it closed, that it was closing or something like that. But they both wrote very well, read very well.
Do you know if she went on to Flanders? I know a lot of them went to Flanders after Carlisle to graduate.
No, my oldest sister went to Flanders. My oldest sister, Harriet. She didn't graduate, though.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your education?
Well, when I first went to school, Chicago Corners, and there was a large student body, and that was in 1941. I was 6 years old, and we had to walk quite a distance to go. It didn't matter how old you were, you walked to go to school. The first grade teacher I had was Pearl Paulus, was my first teacher, and it was three rooms because they had us first and second grade in the basement, and then we had another teacher that came in, Miss Conrad, and she finished up that year. Then the next year, when I was in second grade, we had Mr. Garvey, and then the third year we started there, and we had Miss Sweet was teaching third grade. Then we went to the Catholic school, and we had Sister Arilda for third and fourth grade there.
Catholic school did you go to?
St. Mary's, up by Vandenberg's. And then when we moved again, we moved, I went to Sylvie Summit, that's where I graduated. And we had Mrs. Ryan and Mrs. Van Vonderen over there. It was a 2-room schoolhouse too, and I graduated 8th grade. And then I went to Washington Junior High School, and then when we moved to Black Creek, I transferred to Shiocton High School. Then I went back to East High.
Did you graduate from East High?
I was with the graduation body, but I needed a credit, so that because Shiocton was they call it union free, and you could take classes that weren't acceptable back at East again. When I went back, like I took general business, and they wanted over at East High, they wanted you to have a certain amount of math, regular math, algebra I had, but I needed a half a credit in math. But later on, I went to Chicago and I finished there.
So then you got your high school degree from Chicago?
Yes, and then I started college down there.
Did you get yourself a degree in college? Or?
Well, I have 2 associate degrees, one from University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and that's liberal arts, and then one from Mount Scenario, and that's business administration.
Oh, okay.
Right now, I'm working on 1 credit I need from Mount Scenario. They've closed, but I'll be in their last graduating class, to get the business administration, and I need 1 class at UW Oshkosh to finish the liberal arts. What happened was I went to school when it was convenient, and then when you get past your junior year, it's not feasible to transfer because then your credits aren't all received there. But I had an accident and it put everything on hold. And previous to that, I had a heart attack or a mild heart problem, and everything just sort of came together and everything was on hold.
So when you get those degrees, then will you be having a bachelor's degree then?
I'll have a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Mount Scenario, and I'll have a Bachelor of Arts from UW Oshkosh.
Oh, that's good. So, are you planning on finishing that up then?
Yes, that's one of my goals. It was very hard for us to get an education when we were young. It wasn't an easy thing. I think at that point it was more easier for us to think of going to the moon than to go to college. And most of my friends, like when they got of age, they dropped out of school. A lot of them, they were, had to repeat grades because of absenteeism and stuff. And so a lot of them that were in my grade weren't my age or older, but nevertheless it was very hard for us at that era to get an education.
Can you tell me a little bit about your home life when you were growing up, like when you were really young?
Well, I know from what they have told me we were very poor. When my mother and father worked over at Grimm's during the Depression, and it was a place near Manitowoc, and it was, I think, like a lumber yard. There was a lot of Indians went there, a lot of Oneidas, and it was like you owed your life to the country store. You worked for them, but then you had to pay everything back to the store and for your living quarters. And so when they finally got out of debt there, they moved to that little house I was telling you about. But my sister Evangeline Roberta was born in Manitowoc during that time, and because we were very poor, one of the children had died of, I think it was dysentery or something like that, 13 months old. And then my sister and I were born at that house, and from there we moved, like I said, to the smaller house, and my brother Wayne was born. Then we had the farm, and that's my best memory was, and I always thought of that as my home, the farm, because my dad and mother was together there, and we had animals, and we had pigs and chickens and cows and horses, and we had gardens. We had contract with Seymour Canning Company. We had contract for beans and other vegetables. That seemed to be the best time. I always thought of it as home. We were always rather poor, but we got by. We had enough clothes, and we had enough to eat. Later on, as our houses got smaller and we were almost destitute, and so, we had very hard times. Like oranges we only got at Christmas time, and we seen some hard Christmases. we used to go to Seymour where they had Santa Clauses, and we changed jackets and going through the line, go through the line again, and they'd give a bag. In those days, they gave a lot. They gave you a bag with a popcorn ball and an orange and an apple and candy cane, and then a big handful of nuts and candy. And we could just put it all in the big dish pan when we got home and sort it all out. Put the candy canes up on the tree, and we didn't have electric, so we used to put a lot of candy on the tree.
Yeah.
Mm.
What else did you do at Christmas?
Well, usually we always got one present. Not everything we wanted. Just we didn't dare ask and say we want this. We just surprised me. It was that attitude. And then we'd get something from the church, and that was it. School, you could never count on the presents. They'd always send notes home, say, "Don't get us tablets and pencils," and yet people would do that.
Yeah.
They would still just give the children and wrap it up tablet and pencil, because everybody seemed. Well, there was some of them that were a little better off, but everybody seemed to be in the same boat. They were hard up on the reservation here.
You mentioned that you got presents from the church. What church did you attend?
At that time, we were baptized Methodist. The older ones were baptized at the Episcopal Church, but my mother's family were originally Catholic. A lot of her aunts and uncles on her mother's side are buried over at St. Mary's here in Oneida, but we all were. From Irene down, we were baptized, and the older ones also were baptized Methodist. We went there, and then back in 1948, I think we started attending the Mormon church sessions. And in 1951, we were baptized. The ones that were living at home, the four of us and my mother. And I'm still go to the Mormon church. My children were baptized Mormons. My grandchildren.
Is there anything else you can tell me about your early childhood?
Well, there was happy times, there was bad times. There was times when we were destitute, and we used to pick beans. I had to pick beans when I was 7, 8 years old, and we'd get 2 cents a pound, and then as we got older, it was like 3 cents a pound, and we'd done babysitting. 9 years old, we had a responsibility of babysitting. We had to change diapers and whatnot, and we were already taught how to cook and how to, not heavy cooking, but just to do dishes and housework, and we used to wash on a washboard, so we all had to take a turn on that, and wash clothes and stuff like that, mow the lawn. There was. And some of the places we lived, we had to haul water, and we always had a set of clothes was for Sunday clothes, and then later on they turned into school clothes, and they got another set for Sunday. But we seemed to make hand it down to the next younger one and so forth. I think the closeness of the small, close proximity of living in a small house gave us a good rapport within each other, because we didn't have those juvenile problems that they have nowadays. That we all depended on each other, and then the community also seemed like it was clusters like churches and schools where you had friends and you were dependent on people. That it wasn't too much of a class system. It wasn't. It was more or less everybody was in the same boat. I remember when my mother, people would go by to visit, and my mother would say, "Call them in," because we didn't have a refrigerator, and it was time to eat. So bring them in, give them cold water. Sometimes they'd just stop in and say hello, and then we get the news. There was things like that was really good gestures, and then hoyaning. Those kind of things that we used to go from door to door, and we'd have these flour sacks, and we'd drag those along, and then we try to go to all the the white people's houses because they would give us fruit and cookies and popcorn balls. And with the Oneidas, we'd get the donuts. We had a lot of donuts at home.
What does Hoyan mean?
Happy New Year. That's what they told. They said it was go around wishing everybody Happy New Year. And some people would have us in and give us, hot drinks or give us something. Yeah, give us hot cocoa.
You look so cold.
Well, yeah, and we'd walk a long ways. We'd walk from that farmhouse where we lived there on Van Boxel Road. We'd walk all the way up to Vandenberg's, and then we'd come down all the way across by Gersau's and go up down the road. There was Adeline Linham was down in that area, and then we would, and Ben Jordan, and we walk all the way back down, and all it was what we knew, my mother would say, "Don't go too far," but we were getting greedy, we'd come and we'd just be dragging those bags, and yeah, it was a good time. It was cold and that, but we just really looked forward to that. And then it seemed to phase out. But in the 50s, when I left, I got married and left and went to Chicago, where my ex-husband was working, and it wasn't too prevalent. Once in a while, people would come.
Yeah.
And mainly there were the adults would come in and visit, sit in there, some tuition, Hoyan.
How long did you live in Chicago?
Almost 20 years. I went down there, and my 2 children were born there, and I was fortunate. Around here, there was no work. It was very hard to find jobs at that time, and I went down to Chicago, and they told me, well, when I applied, I was very fortunate. I found an office job right away, and even though I didn't have a diploma at the time, I had 4 years of high school, which counted, and then there was always plenty of work, like during the holiday season. I'd work in factories at night, and find something, usually from October to February, would supplement my income. And then I went back to school on my own. After I got a divorce, I raised my children on my own. Didn't ask for no handouts from nobody, and when I asked her about school, but they had told me at that time if I went back home, and they had a relocation program that was going on, and they were sending people to go to California and Ohio, and I was quite settled in Chicago, but there was no way they could help me, so I had to pay for my own school. I went back to school. I knew I was kind of stuck in these office positions where I wasn't going to be making a whole lot of money, and my children were getting older, and so I explored X-ray technician, where I had to go full time, and then I also explored the key punch was coming in those days, and that was another one that's full time, and the tuition was very absorbent. So I went to beauty culture school and talked to the owner, and she said, "Well, you can come part time Saturdays and when you're not working, and evenings, and you can pay your tuition, as you go along." So it worked out, and I didn't really want to go into that field, but I ended up being the best student, and I got the Outstanding Student Award, got the trophy like this, and then I got a scholarship for teaching. So that I went for the teaching course, and I finished that, and at the time, they had told me I was the first known Native American teacher in the state of Illinois. So I think that was a little bit of accomplishment, and then I worked as a teacher. And then I decided to open up my own shop. I started out with 2 beauty shops and then went down to 1 because it was too much to handle. And then my daughters were graduating school, and I thought, well, they're getting at the age near to 18, and I wanted to go back to school. In the meantime, I had taken some courses, college credit courses here and there. So I wanted to go to school full time, so I moved to Lake Forest. I got a scholarship at this Catholic Women's College, Barra College, And my daughters also got scholarships there, and so we moved there. And then I heard about UWGB and the Oneida language, but I always was thinking of coming home. We always think of Oneida as home. This was home. When you went anywhere, we didn't go, on vacations anyplace else. We always came here because this was our home, and we'd always call it up north or going home, or
Yeah.
There was never any thought that would go anyplace else. And even now in retirement, this is where I want to stay. I'd like to go and spend maybe a few winter months somewhere, but this is my home.
Yeah. Were you ever handed down any heirlooms from your mother or father, or your grandparents?
Well, when my grandmother died, my mother's mother, there was a jewelry box there, and they told us we could have what we wanted. And there was some of these original silver brooches,
Oh, yeah.
and they were all, they need to be polished, and they didn't look so good. And I just left them there, and I didn't know that much about. I did know about Indian history and some Oneida history, but I didn't realize those were really heirlooms in here. I don't know what happened to those, but there was other, things that we just took for granted. And they told us a lot about the culture. They did, my grandmothers, both of them, but practiced Indian medicine, and they did baskets, and they did knew a lot about the gathering, about the medicines and stuff like that.
Did they ever tell you what kind of plants or herbs that they used for medicines, and what the medicines were used for?
Well, when I used to go out with my grandmother, my mother's mother, that only thing we used to go and pick greens. And sometimes she'd point to stuff, but I didn't pay much attention at the time. And then another thing was, we always wanted to talk Oneida, at home, and we'd ask about Oneida things, and they'd say, oh, you have to go into society, because my parents were products of the government school, and this is where they were kind of brainwashed, and they said, well, you're going to have to live in a society now, and they felt like being traditional was going to be regressing, so they said, no, if you want to be successful, you're going to have to think like the culture is now and stuff, and they just kind of shunned us. They'd talk all the time over the table, Oneida. Visitors came, they'd always talk Oneida. Then I used to always say, well, the cat and dog knew more Oneida than we did. they could talk to the animals, in Oneida, and they'd respond, but they just didn't encourage it. And I was always nosy. I'd always ask some words, and it's funny though, because nothing sticks with me now. I mean, only words that I know are the ones that I learned when I was a kid. That I can go to classes and I can study, and then I forget them. The culture part, they did talk about the longhouse. My mother lived in New York for a while, and that told us about the longhouse, and told us, they used to tell stories, like witchcraft and stuff like that too. Well, they just told us about the ceremonies, and that we were all longhouse. That's our birthright. They said even the religion didn't clash with that, because we were all by our birthright. We're longhouse members, and it's just because Christianity was, we were indoctrinated to that, and kind of nobody wants to give it up, because that's the way we were brought up. But just to remember that's our birthright, and to respect it. I guess that's what they were trying to imply.
Did they ever say anything about anybody doing any kind of witchcraft?
They just never talked about any individual, but they were always prevalent. It was prevalent. And then they talked about the healers and they had, and stuff like that. So we were conscious of it. We were always conscious of being Oneida, I guess that's what he would say. And there was a lot of prejudice existing during my childhood, that when you went outside the reservation or even within, there was a lot of prejudice. But they always said to be proud. Like I always said, well, my parents didn't leave us a lot of money. They didn't make sure we got a higher education, all that, because they couldn't afford it. But they did leave us with a lot of pride and a lot of respect. That was the biggest thing they left us with, is pride of knowing who we are, and just not be asking for handouts or grovel around, stuff like this. And I think all of us in our family are kind of rather just proud. None of us have, well, we had our problems, and none of us have gone really downhill.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that your mother at one point lived in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if she was born in New York, or was she born here?
She was born in Syracuse. My grandmother said in those days they used to go all the time back and forth. They had friends over there and relatives, and there was a boarding house where my grandmother and her sister Cora went to work in Syracuse. And there was, I guess there was a lot of Oneidas there, because after my grandfather, well, he got killed on this, as he worked for the streetcar company, and he got killed there in a streetcar.
Where was
in New York, in Syracuse. And after he died, well then, women weren't never alone. They always found someone for them or something. But then she married Chauncey Adams, and her sister Cora married Julius Adams.
Mm-hmm.
They're out there, and they came back to Oneida, and they lived over there on Double E, where
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Denny lives now.
Mm-hmm.
That was my grandmother's homestead there. And then around the corner was Cora's, and that was the original allotment land. And up further up was their parents, Elijah. They call it Lambie Road now, but then across the road was Jesse, the oldest one of the family. And up to across from the museum was Jim Cornelius. Yeah.
Now, how were they all related to you?
Those were my grandmother's, my mother's, on my mother's side, my grandmother's family.
Were those her brothers?
No, her uncles. My grandma was Elsie Cornelius.
Yeah.
And then there was Jim and Jesse and Herbert, the blacksmith. Well, there's I don't know if I can remember all of them.
But those were your grandmother's brothers and sisters?
Yeah. Okay. Nancy Cornelius, the first nurse or something that they had in Wisconsin.
Oh.
That was my grandmother's oldest sister.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember anything about your father's side of the family?
Yes,
further back?
he had his brothers were Anderson and Hyson, and there was Fred, and there was Albert, and there Chester, and then he had two sisters, Julia and Irene. And Julia, she went out east to school, and she met her husband there, and she moved to Roswell, New Mexico, and never came back. But we always saw pictures of her, but I don't remember meeting her. Irene had a daughter named Delilah, and they used to come from Minnesota and visit us every time they came back. And Albert, his wife was Eva, and Chester was Phoebe, his wife was Phoebe. Hyson, I forgot, she was a Summers. I forgot her name. We never saw too much of her. But Hyson at one time was a tribal chairman too at one time.
What about Eastman?
Oh, Eastman, I forgot about. Yeah, I was trying to think of him. Yeah, it was Eastman. I think I missed two of them, two more. But there was only two girls, but there was about 7 or 8 boys in that family. Oh, there was, I think I named Fred.
Was Hyson's wife's name Emmeline?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty sure. Yeah, Emmeline Summers, she was.
Do you know what what role Hyson played in within the tribe?
He was a chairman, I know, it's doing way back in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
He was kind of active in, well, Anderson was too, was always active. He was chairman of the land committee at one time. They had a land committee way back then. And then the other brothers, I know they used to go to meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So,
They,
today they're all gone?
oh yeah, yeah, they're all passed on. Even my mother had a half-sister, Irene Adams, and she's dead too. And then they were 13 years apart.
Oh,
And my mother was brought up with Virgie Paulus. She was Virgie Cornelius, married Alphion Paulus.
Mm-hmm.
They were 3 years apart, and they were like sisters all the time. They were very close.
Okay. Are all of your, I mean, your two daughters that you have now, have they gone to school and gotten an education too?
They haven't finished college, but they have the equivalent of 3 years of
Mhm.
college, both of them, and then they've also attended classes at the tech school. They currently are working over at the gaming. They just got new positions as a concierge job over there, so they, but they've worked at different things. They've, my youngest one, when she was younger, she traveled with her ex-husband, with the Akwesasne group, and
Oh. Mm-hmm.
he entertained with singing and playing guitar, and she sold her beadwork.
Mm-hmm.
And the oldest one, she also traveled with Mary Greendeer. Her and her husband sold arts and crafts, and they do arts and crafts. And when we first relocated back, they taught arts and crafts. It wasn't really prevalent here then, and they taught beadwork over at the Norbert Hill during the summer
Mhm.
sessions. Taught some beadwork, leathercraft, and stuff like
Do
that.
they teach that to the children?
Yes,
You mentioned that you have a grandson and he's over in, where's he at?
well, my grandson Paul Stevens is over in Kuwait right now. He joined the service voluntarily. He felt very bad about 9/11. He was on his way. We were all at the airport when they closed it. He was on the National Indian Boxing Team, and he was leaving to meet the team to go to Finland, and I think it was 3 other countries that they were going to box out there. The team getting ready for the Olympics and stuff like that. But they closed the airport while we were there, and it was then they just canceled everything, and they didn't make any forward date for it. And when he boxed in the States, there was a fellow that told him about the boxing team that the Army had. And prior to that, it was kind of priming him, telling him, join the Army, you can go to the boxing. But then when he joined, he went to Fort Benning, Georgia. And when he graduated, then he went to Kuwait. They deployed him there, and they came back. He was there 12 weeks. And then they replenished the troops and brought him back. But he was very, something he wanted to do. He felt he could contribute something because of what happened on 9/11. So
now since he went back, he's back over there again?
yes, he's down.
Is he in the same place he was before?
Yes, yeah.
And how many years did he sign up for?
I think it's the minimum of 3 years, something like that. And
Is that the only grandchild you have in the service? Is
yes,
Paul?
mm.
Do your children live around here?
Yes, they live in. Well, since we relocated back 1973, we've always been in close proximity to the reservation. I've been at my place. I got the land in '73, leased land, and I had been living there. It had a small trailer house, and later on put in a double wide, larger one, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and lived there. And the children have lived at was Site 2, Site 1 at different intervals, and then my daughter now lives over at Three Sisters. One of them, and the other ones live in Green Bay. And they work for the tribe. They've always been working for the tribe in some capacity.
And you mentioned you have leased land. Could you tell me what leased land is?
Well, I got a lease through the tribe they have like 2 acres, and you have to have your own house on it. But you own the buildings, but you don't own the land, and then you get that lease. When it's not revocable. It comes up, I guess, every 25 years, and you automatically get it again. So it's like a lifetime. Like when I came back, I said, "Well, this is my home." I come back, and I've been there ever since. That's been 30 years.
So then the leased land that you live on is actually owned by the tribe?
Oh yeah. If I
And you
die,
lease it from the tribe?
one of my heirs can get it. They pay off whatever I owe on the buildings or whatever. But the program I'm under now, from what I understand, is it's elderly housing. And if my daughter isn't old enough to be elderly, then they get an option to buy it, or it goes to another elder. But my daughters are up in that age too. My oldest one just turned 50.
Oh, you're soon be an elder.
Yeah, yeah. My oldest great grandchild is 14.
Oh,
He just turned 14 in February.
okay. Is there any special holidays that you celebrated that you can remember?
Well, birthdays was always a big thing in our family because that was our individual day, and Christmas, it was hard to get a good present because there was so many. And birthdays, my mother always made it special, like special cakes, and was this your special day, you got a better present than you would get at Christmas. But usually it was clothes or something you needed,
Yeah.
And so it's been like that with us. Our birthdays are real important. It's, sometimes I tell the kids, I said, these birthdays run into 3 days sometimes. If somebody's working, we have to have another birthday and so forth. But our birthdays right now with the family, with my family, is a big important day.
So the birthday celebrations then are something that your parents handed down to
Yes.
you? Well, that's nice to have. Any other holidays that you can remember? Did you do anything at Easter special?
Well, go to church was always a big thing, and we never had clothes. It was too cold, like Easter time, we never, Decoration Day, like Memorial Day, we got some really nice clothes to go to church with, but right now we don't dress up special, just go out, like people buy stuff special for Easter, but we do, celebrate Easter Bunny and stuff with the kids.
Yeah.
Get the eggs and have the day before, we have the colorings and stuff, people do, and usually have dinner, we get together and everybody cooks something. I usually get stuck with the ham. Yeah, and Christmas is because of the kids again, and we always, I'm referring to my 2 daughters in the family, because there's quite a number of us now, and we get together and their spouses and stuff, and that we have dinner together, and usually like Thanksgiving too, we always eat early because we try to have the meal on by 12 o'clock, and then everybody can scatter and go and then come back for leftovers. That go to movies, whatever, bowling, whatever they're going to do. When we were down around here in the old days, like turkeys wasn't prevalent. We always had chicken when I was a kid on Thanksgiving, and then capons. I don't know if anybody remembers a capon, but then they came out. We'd stuff those and bake them, and that. I don't know if a turkey was expensive or what, but I don't know if they were wild or what, but I know they had turkeys in the woods. If somebody wanted to hunt, we used to see them going to school, walking to school. There was a turkey in the woods. We didn't know if it was a tame one that went out there or was a wild one or what. But we ate a lot of game. If somebody after my dad died and the boys were in the service, and if someone would give us some game, and then people used to sell fish. They'd come along in the spring and they'd sell suckers, and if you had enough money, you'd buy the whole fish, and then sometimes they'd have them cleaned, and then sometimes they just sell you the heads. We eat sucker heads. Yeah, that people said, "Did you eat those?" I said, "Yes, I remember eating those." We thought nothing of it. And then leeks too. Leeks was a big thing in the spring, and I remember the teacher would close the school because if you ate leeks, they said you didn't notice anybody else's bad breath, but but if if you didn't eat it, well then I guess it smelled pretty raunchy. But yeah, I remember a teacher one time closed the school because everybody had eaten leeks.
That's something. Do you have any kind of hobbies that you do for yourself?
Yeah, I think of myself as a musician. I love music. I played in a high school band, and I never had lessons. We were too poor to get lessons, and when I applied when I was a freshman in Shiocton, and the instructor said, "We only have a big baritone sax left," and so I used to drag that thing and home and stuff, and it would sound like a foghorn boot like this, and my mother said, "You go out, sit behind that wood pile," and and by the time the keys started freezing up in October and end of October, I was playing tune. But then he said, "Well, now we got a tenor sax. It's a little smaller, but it was big." So then by Christmas time, the semester ended there, and then I got into alto sax. And then the next year when I started, he said, "We got a clarinet." And then also they were giving baton lessons, so I took baton lessons for a while. This was all free at the school, but the other than that, I never had a lesson. My mother had a piano all the time, and we kind of played around with that, but she was something like, "Don't touch," it was hers, You didn't bang on the piano. But then I always appreciated music, and I play like a little guitar, and I have a violin now with an accordion. I have an organ, and I saxophone and that. But my breath isn't no good anymore. I can't do any wind instruments.
Did your mother play the piano a lot for you?
My mother played by ear. Any song she heard on the radio, she could sit down, and she had an old-fashioned one like this sitting here, and she could play it after, just fooling around and play it, and we'd sing those songs, like "You Are My Sunshine" and all those popular ones of the day in those days. And just church hymns, she could play all those too. But I don't know, she was very musical like that. My cousin Virgie, one that was brought up with her, also played, but she took lessons.
Do you remember what kind of work your father did?
He was like a common laborer and a farmer. It was hard for him to find jobs in those days not only because of the prejudice and stuff, but it was he wasn't too healthy. He got hurt during World War I. He had a plate in his head. Every so often they had to go. He had to go down to Wood, that Veterans Hospital, and they would lift that metal plate up and clean that out because it was festering in there. And they said eventually they had told him that he would had to commit himself because that was pressing on his brain. He was getting brain cancer and stuff like that, and was affecting his thinking and stuff.
Do you remember what, was he in any one of the wars?
World War I, yes, that happened there. Yeah, he was a veteran. My mother was in the auxiliary.
And do you know if he just was overseas at all, where he was?
I think so. Yeah, because he was a veteran of foreign wars. The VFW belonged to that, so.
Was he in the Army or?
Army, yeah. But he was never healthy after that, and then they didn't give him a pension or nothing, and he used to go and sometimes go to town and come back and say, well, he waited at the docks, and then he worked up at the Cranberry Marsh, and that must have been hard work, because I remember he would come home and his boots would be wet and his socks, and it was cold, and stuff, and then they went, for weeks they would go to these camps, like for cutting wood and stuff, and jobs were not plentiful, and there was, I know they said they'd moved back from Manitowoc. He worked at the grocery store as a clerk for a while then, and it was a pretty good job, and then he worked at the bar as a maintenance fellow, but he could do everything. He gave haircuts at home.
Oh.
He did dry cleaning at home. He dry cleaned clothes and iron them up and stuff like that. And he could do carpentry work. He repaired things. People would bring stuff there to get repaired.
Something else I had on my mind I was going to ask you. I lost it. Oh, I know. Have you yourself been involved in the tribal government in any way?
Well, I've just served on some committees. I've been on the museum board, the library board. Right, currently I'm on the Trust and Enrollment Board. I'm the secretary, and the Land Claims Commission. I'm a secretary there, and on the library board I'm chair. But in the past I've been chair of the library board, and I've been on the museum board. I've been on personnel commission. I was chair of that. I was elected to the gaming commission and elected to the appeals commission at the same time, and I relinquished the appeals to stay on the gaming commission, and that it was back in 1983. I was hired by the tribe. Before that, I worked 9 years for a foundation in the Green Bay area, and I was hired by the tribe to set up a records management system for the court, and the court was voted down, so they put me over to the museum and told me to set up a records management system there, and the grant was running out. They asked me to make an extension. I didn't see the grant at all, and they gave me the grant and said, ask for an extension of this grant to get this records management system going. So meantime I was doing the records management system for the museum. When I looked at the grant, here it was for the tribe, it wasn't for the museum, so then we set up a records management system for the tribe, so I was the first records manager and for the system that we have there. And in there we had set up a micrographics division, and we active records that we control, and then we had the inactive storage area, and also we called it the archival repository because we had archival work stuff in there that we gleaned from the records, but it was never sanctioned that it was official archives. And that's what the tribe needs right now, is an official archival, an official archive building, because we have everything, like some in the museum, some of the library, some of the culture center, and they need that into one building where people are going to codify it and also restore it. All this stuff needs to be properly treated and restored and stored in a good manner where it can be retrieved easily. Then from there, I left there because I was elected to the gaming commission, and then they offered me a paid position, and I was getting kind of old to be climbing up the ladder and getting 40-pound boxes down. And so I decided to move over, even though I got a little cut in pay, and went over, and I knew it was an elected position, but that's why I went into retirement, because I wasn't elected and I was kind of forced into retirement. But I'm still hoping to get a job within the tribe, something I like, though. I like to make money, but I'm more would like to work with something I would really enjoy.
Are you currently retired now?
Well, unofficially, I tell everybody I'm retired, but I still have it in my head that I'm going to go back to work. Yes, I've worked all my life. I mean, you know, even when I was home when I was little, like I was saying, we picked beans in the summer. We babysat. We cherry picked. I worked at the drugstore for Margaret Kerstetter and that down there, and I also babysat, and we did all these chores, you know, and went to babysat for my sisters, and when you babysat in those days, you didn't just sit there and watch the kids and, you know, have them, people leave out all these goodies for you. You had to cook, clean, do everything when you babysat. And cherry picking was one of the biggest things of our life. That's some memories. I had some good memories because we worked hard, but we were like kind of free up there, and we had to pay our way, but it was kind of a little vacation from home.
You mentioned that you worked for Kerstener's drugstore. So you must be kind of familiar with Old Oneida then. Could you tell us what you remember about Old Oneida?
Well, there used to be the post office up there where Woody Webster lived. His mother lived there. That used to be a post office. It was kind of like a nice little village. It was Spike's store. That was Schrader's. They call it Spike's. And then there was Morgan's. And then Wally Bunker. I'm talking about the 50s now. And Wally Bunker had the bar where Beaver has now. And he had for a while a restaurant there. And then he turned into a laundromat with the bar. And there was a bar, 2 bars across. And there was a filling station. And that was the hub of everything. Where as teenagers we'd go up there just to get some ice cream or something, and it was a big deal to walk up there. And then we went, Rosie, the White Eagle was open, and Rosie, but we never were allowed in White Eagles. And Rosie's had she sold ice cream and stuff, so we'd go down there sometime, but she wouldn't allow us to loiter. But then they opened a log cabin back in 51, I think it was. And that was, they had some pinball machines in there and a jukebox. And it was the VFW. And we used to go down there, and then Rosie had, on Sundays, she'd have roller skating in her dance hall. And when they had dances, that was a big thing for us, too. We'd go, and even if we didn't dance, we'd just go to be out, you know.
Good watch.